Hello, everybody. Let's just let them in. And welcome to a Fida talk. We're joined here by the amazing Kate Gibb. And I was just talking to Kate about how I came across her work at famous sort of printmakers back in the day, Artomatic. I think they're still going. I don't know. You'll let me know in a minute. But they were really well-known printmakers who did sort of off-the-wall art print works. And I guess to start off this sort of conversation, Kate, is sort of a little bit of your journey from going into college, going
Yeah,
into printmaking, and how you got there. I guess that's a good start.
yeah, why not? First time so basically everything I do is silk screen, pretty much, or some sort of analog mark making. Um, and I was introduced to the technique of silk screen when I was doing my A levels in Suffolk in this tiny little place. And I saw we had an artist in residence who I now know to be Paul Burgess, and he does a lot of the work. Used to teach at Brighton. And he also has just released the pulp book. So that's been his project. But he, back in the day, was our artist in residence, and he made this big textile print. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So that was my introduction to silkscreen. I went on to do a foundation, and then I got into Middlesex University and did a degree in printed textiles. And there, the textiles were mainly sort of wall hangings, not sort of design textiles. So you were kind of like painting onto fabric. Then I left, yeah, I graduated from there, signed on, took the summer off, and I was just painting really from home. And just I just used to paint and then basically sell them to Habitat, who is now, I mean, Habitat is still going, but it's now owned by Homebase, isn't it? I think. But it was obviously this wonderful sort of design emporium. And they just let me put the paintings up on the wall and people used to come in and buy them. And then I was sort of in limbo and I thought, well, maybe I'll do an MA and I'll see with that, and maybe I'll be able to teach a bit. So I was just sort of making it up as I went along. I applied for a part-time MA at St Martin's in communication design. And really, I just wanted to use the print facilities because I couldn't afford to set anything up or have a studio. I didn't get in. And then a few days later, I did get in because someone dropped out and I was sort of down on the list. So that was good. And I did a 2-year part-time MA. So it was 2 afternoons a week. And I sort of scraped by, but I was just interested in using their print room. And then in the second year of that, I started, in fact, I was just talking to Patrick about this, about sending work out. We basically had a color copier, which was sort of avant-garde in those days. And we put our prints on there, photocopied them, and I made sort of packs and I sent them out to kind of design groups really that seemed to be making work where I thought maybe I could fit in. So this was a time where record sleeve art was like a massive platform for artists to be seen really. And there was a lot of money and budgets being put into campaigns for musicians. So this is back when like Travis, Blur, these bands that had lovely big lots of sort of fine art involved, photographics campaigns taken. So I sent some work to Blue Source, which was a design group then. It's now known as Village Green. And they picked up on that and just said, oh, do you want to pitch for this job? And I got my first little record campaign from them for a band called Mono, which was quite small, but it was a really lovely campaign to work on. I didn't really have studio facilities. I had the ones at college, but I felt very sort of constrained by that. I needed a space where I could just sort of like put some music on and half a day would pass and I would just be making work. So I borrowed a friend's studio and I silkscreen, but I kind of collaged with silkscreen. I didn't have any photographic silkscreen equipment to use. So I just sort of made it up as I went along. And then I had a part-time job in a publisher's making fake books for trade fairs. and that sort of gave me money. And through time, I managed to get a little tiny studio space for like 80 quid a month, where I could make textile designs, make collages. And then a year later, I was approached to pitch for the Chemical Brothers campaign for Surrender. And I pitched for that and I got it. And then that was basically a really nice job where you had lots of time to make art, you got paid really well, you got weeks to make each sleeve. The band came over, the record label came over. It was a joy to do it. And that first campaign, and also got paid really well. So from that, I then got my first studio space. Well, I had the little one, it sort of doubled in size. And then I made a very basic silkscreen setup, because that's actually quite straightforward. My stepdad built me a UV light box, and that was that. And 25 years later, I'm still using the same light box, using the same 300 quid press, just, yeah, making prints.
Well, that I guess that sort of process of build, grow, adapt, and be quite versatile and agile is a really nice sort of approach to ways of working. And we spoke earlier about printmaking and sending out work to get work.
Yeah.
I think listening to you now and thinking about the current industry we're in, where people maybe rely on social media quite heavily, and we maybe have got a bit lazy in the art of going out and just networking with people that can get you commissioned work. So like
absolutely targeting
targeting
people. I mean, also it's just really nice to meet people, isn't it? I mean, most of us, I imagine, when you're creative, you're spending a lot of time quite introverted or in a space where you can make work. It's I think it's quite typical not to be surrounded by people. And studio spaces are really important if you can afford something like that, or a space where you can make work and leave it there and pick it up a few hours later, and you don't have to tidy everything away. Just having that zone. And when I first started, if you got a commission for a job, obviously we didn't have mobiles either. So how did they get in touch with you? God, I don't even know. I didn't think we had email. I had a pager, if you know what that is. And you get a little bleep, and it would be like, can you call this number? So then I'd go and call that number, and they'd say, oh, we might have a job for you. It's Bloomsbury Books. And you'd think, oh, that's nice. So you'd put you wouldn't presume to get the job. I'd put all my prints and I always worked big, in a big portfolio that was really bloody heavy, wheel it up on some little suitcase trolley situation, and like drag it through town into Soho Square, where Bloomsbury was then, and show them my work. I'd meet the people, see, half of the job would be just going out and talking about the work. And I think then you sort of, sometimes you get so much more from the job, because you're so much more in tune with people. You might have a chat with the author, for example, and then you go back and make the work. And nowadays it's like an email, this is the budget, do you want to do it, we like these pictures. You're talking to yourself, really. So I think, yeah, as much as it has pros and cons, I miss the old days of actually making contact. So I mean, we can do this now, can't we? So
yeah. I guess this is
it's different.
It is different, but it's quite, I don't know, it's hard to, because obviously we all feel nostalgic about the smell of print and taking things to meetings. And then I guess you get older and probably a bit lazier, and getting to London is expensive, and
absolutely
all those things.
Or you leave I left my portfolio on a bus once, and that had all my Chemical Brothers stuff in it. I just got off and I literally sprinted to the next bus stop to stop the bus. And I thought I was going to be violently sick. And I don't miss things like that. It's like, I don't miss having to find a payphone and having the coins ready. So, it's just, what I miss is the human connection when you're discussing work. Yeah. And that's the beauty of Zoom. At least we can see each other and show each other work, and, share a space.
Zoom's brought that, because Skype, I don't know, I didn't adapt to Skype. I used Skype a little bit. And then when Zoom hit in, it's really
it's changed
the game. But let me just want to share I just
Yeah.
want to share because I've got some bits to show, so people can kind of get a grasp of what we're talking about because we're mentioning all these names and
Yeah.
I'm used to your work. It's just let's see the other people.
And feel free to ask any questions if you would like to, if there's something specific
So
you want, you know.
I guess we'll move through the images. So here I picked all these images, and it's nice
Yeah,
for me to
it's
kind of
interesting to know what you're going to pick. Yeah.
scour around. So as this is a sort of fashion art
Mm,
illustration platform, and we're starting to bring in some of the people that are more like people that I'm interested in, more
hmm.
people that have touched on my life from printmaking. You know, I did printmaking at Kingston,
Yeah,
and
you can tell. I can
it
see
was
that.
really great. You know, I loved it, and I loved the whole concept of printmaking. And Photoshop was just coming out as I left college, and it was really nice. You know, I remember seeing your work, and I remember seeing a few other people's work, and you were really conscious not to sort of be a pastiche. That's all I remember. As teacher said, "Don't be a
That's
pastiche of this
wow.
person's work." So we'd have a few works
That's
that and you were
interesting.
starting to get published, and we'd go, and I became more of your aware of your work when I was at Artomatic, and I was like, I need to draw. So I just went back to drawing. So I didn't go down this printmaking. But what I loved about your work was this sort of, you know, you're looking at the photography. There's a sort of sense of style there, and I picked these images because there's almost a sense of mood. And I don't know, you might explain
Yeah,
these more to me, but
I guess isn't that interesting? And also, I always think it's fascinating when you other people make comments or have their thoughts and ideas around your work. And it was that when you said not to be sort of use pastiche or kind of like mimic other people. And that's so hard to do when you're young, isn't it? Because you're just so inspired by people. Um, and it's nice to, I guess I always say to my students just to kind of do what comes naturally to you, and when you're trying to be like something else, you're not making authentic work, so you just kind of get on with it. And again, interesting your comments about these works. So the middle piece and the girl on the lilo to the right was probably for one of my, apart from the Kens, one of my favorite ever jobs, which was working for Dries van Noten, who obviously are just the most incredible fashion house based in Antwerp. And this collaboration was, instead of having what you call it, like a lookbook of just of photographs, they decided that for their lookbook for the spring summer that year that they were going to have it more like a big scrapbook, and that basically I would be working with the photographer to interpret the new collection, but with a sort of set of parameters that even though it was going to be silk screened and sort of like played with, that the colors and the garments had to look as realistic as possible. So the menswear, the theme for the menswear was David Hockney, and the theme for the women's wear was the 1940s. So that we then picked a photographer. It was set up by an art director, Nancy Rhodes, who still is a massive part of Dries van Noten, worth looking up. And we worked with a photographer called Ellen Nolan, and they all went to Miami and I didn't. There was a small window where I was supposed to go, but they just said, "Oh, what do you need?" And I said, "Well, what I need is contrast. As much as I like natural light photography and kind of hazy moments, and it was being shot in Miami, so the light was obviously beautiful. I said, that's no good for my type of silk screen I need." So we had a big discussion over it. And then they came back from their lovely time in Miami, and I got a big pile of actual, printed photographs. And then I transferred these into silk screen. And it was just the most gorgeous job because I loved David Hockney. I loved Ellen's style of photography. I loved the Dries. I love, what they make and what they create and what they stand for. So that was one job. And then the job to the left is the album cover for this French guy here called Miasek. And I imagine he's probably in his late 50s, early 60s now, but he was a punk back in the day in the 70s. And he has had a career. He has a punk ethos that he's kept going, and this is him now. And often I'd sort of pastiche myself because the Dries work, which was made 20 plus years ago, was referenced for the Miasek work. But this time, again, I worked with a photographer that I talked him, the shoot was taken in Paris, but again, I would sort of dictate what I needed and show him samples of my work. And then we created a campaign of sort of 10 prints around him. Yeah, so that's something, that job is, I guess it's a bit like with the Surrender campaign, which was the biggest campaign for the Chemical Brothers. I often get, these are the bits of work I like of yours, but just do what you do something new. And basically, a lot of the clients, without saying, want you to do something that looks like something you did 20 years ago. And often it's not as great. But when they put the effort in and they have a budget for a photographer and you're not just buying stock images, it totally works. And
Yeah,
you can really enjoy it.
you can see the difference.
You can
It's
see the
interesting.
difference. Yeah.
It's interesting to just see I guess the tonality between the guy with the yellow shirt, which has it always reminds me of a sort of Paolo Reversi sort of feel to it. It's more subtle, where the
Yeah.
sort of Miami, them LA, they're really bright Hockney-esque colours.
Yeah.
Is great. And
I guess the difference here, although they handled it, oh no, did they shoot him on film in the end? Because the Dries stuff was on film because digital cameras had only just started to exist. And I can't remember if Miasek, maybe they did get someone in to shoot him on film. So I think they did actually, because just the quality of the photograph that you turn into silkscreen when it's shot on film, it's something to do. I mean, I'm not a technical person, but all the sort of resolution in a digital image and then the resolution on a screen, and I don't know, it just isn't, I don't feel it's nice. There's ways around it, but film just naturally, it just marries everything together. So and creates nuance that I think digital photography is less nuanced in that way because it's more of a sort of technical, like scientific formula behind it, isn't there?
yeah, and I guess Photoshop probably didn't exist, so you can't really play
No,
with
I
lighting.
didn't. Do you know what I used actually? I did use Photoshop for the Maya set work, but my Photoshop skills basically go from like scan it in, turn it into grayscale, and
Output.
change the contrast,
Yeah,
change the curve, and print it out. That's it. I don't use Photoshop in that way. The Dries stuff, I think Photoshop was around. I don't think I had a computer. I think what I did was I got the photographs back and I put them on a black and white copier and played around with contrast
yeah,
and light and movement on the copier. And then I had the photocopies, I got them scanned in, and then I made the positives from that.
yeah. What we
There was a lot of chance there. Really, if I look at it now and I look at the image of the guy in the middle, his trench mat coat
yeah,
thing, it would have been nice to have a little bit more detail in that left side, but then also that kind of is the
it's
nice thing
magic.
about it. Yeah, is the
Yeah.
magic. But I think as I get older, it's sometimes harder to let those things
It's
go.
nice. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? You think, oh
yeah,
shit, I haven't got any detail in that. I need to go back and redo that.
yeah.
Whereas when I was younger, I was just like, oh, this is, I don't know, it was just me or life, or you're more open to leaving things as they are rather than trying to
No, no,
do
I
what you
think
think is the
it's
right
good.
thing.
It's good that there's nice subtleties and there's subtleties in the trousers and I think
I
they've
love that. I love printing those, like printing the trousers were red, but like printing them in red and then making the shadow in a darker red, not just having
yeah.
one photographic color was
I think that's really
fun.
that's where I guess the little magic moments and that sets off the jacket from the trousers. So what we
Yeah, and
used to
you
do,
read it, don't you, in your mind? You make up the rest yourself, I guess.
well, when you mentioned the photocopier, because we didn't have money to make film, we had to put olive oil on them. Did you ever try that?
Oh yeah, I did, but
It
I
was
think you
too
have to have a
messy.
really good light box to do that as well.
It was at
Do you know what?
college. It
A
was at
really
college.
powerful one. Yeah. I mean, I just used to we had an A4 printer and then the ink was different. It's not eco like it is now. So you could put acetates in and then just like stick them together and make a
Puzzle
big
it
is it.
together.
But
It
all
works.
these things are
Whatever
real learning
works.
curves, aren't they? Yeah, but I think that is how we learn. And because so much is done for us today nowadays, you miss those little bits that I think
Yeah.
they're big, you know,
But
I mean, you learn different things.
they're the details of your knowledge box for when you're, even if
Yeah.
you're using Photoshop or whatever you're
Sorry.
using, you're applying that knowledge. I think that's quite important. And then there was these three I really liked that. I thought
Yeah, they were the Dries
compositions are great as
campaign.
well. Was this part of the Dries Van Norton as
They're
well?
all the Dries, yeah. Yeah.
So good.
But a lot of those again were done in quite a sort of simple way, like the girl lying on the sun lounger. Most of it was stencils because I didn't have enough screens to make a screen for the shape of the bed, a screen for the jacket, a screen for the shoe, a screen for the. So I just kind of like would just have bits of newsprint and cut paper stencils out. I'd use the light box, use the big acetate as my image, and like the little straps on her shoes. I just kind of, yeah, just like stenciled them on.
I guess
Sort of,
no one
yeah.
would know. No one would know them little using newsprint
No,
pencils and
yeah. I think that's it. That when you use a newsprint stencil as opposed to maybe a photographic stencil, again, you get the cut shape of the paper or the scissors makes it, nothing's perfect, and it just brings an image to life, I think, doesn't it?
yeah,
In that kind,
yeah.
or can do.
The handmade touch brings it in, which is
Yeah,
quite a nice sort of touch to it. And then obviously moving on to these are sort
yeah.
of the dramatic pieces, and these are the pieces when I first got introduced. Well, I think I saw the Dries Van Norton maybe in a published books, but this was the work.
Yeah, there was quite a lot of fashion published books then, wasn't there? Before we had the internet, so much
There was more books,
more
and then
books.
I guess these kind of images. If you, I don't know if you want to expand, and I always loved the rainbow because I was like, God, that would have cost so much money to do them little details.
Oh my God, yeah, that was what. See, what was funny about the surrender image now again is that when I got that job, so the surrender image is the main image with the Jesus guy with his hands up in that moment of, and it's in Olympia, and it's a photograph we bought from an usage of in an image library, and again, I then didn't have a light box in my studio. It was just before, so I went back to my own college, put the screens in the car, and made the screens up. But I didn't realize that something was wrong with their light box. I think one of the bulbs was faulty. And actually, when you look at it, like if you look at the guy in the bottom left who's sort of lying on his side, he's got no face because the screen didn't come out properly. But I didn't really know that. And I just sort of went with it and thought, oh, it just makes interesting shapes and there's bits of information that's lost and then I can put bits in. And that's how I kind of approached the campaign. And then the rainbow on everybody's arm is hand painted just with gouache paint and a paper stencil over the top. Because really, although I silkscreen, I only really make one of things. It's like a painting as opposed to a multiple making an edition of something. The campaign was a big success for the band, and Virgin Records, who they were signed to, decided that they would pay me to make 10 more of these surrender prints to give out to the band and management and different people that had worked on the job. So it took me a month to make 10 and do all the hand painting. But when I went back to re-expose the screen, it came out like a completely different image with everybody's faces on, all the rest, all the bits that I'd lost because they'd mended the light box. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going? Like, it looks quite different. So the image that you've put right at the beginning of your presentation, which is the surrender image in different colors, has much more detail because of that. So
Right.
it's like these sort of happy accidents in life, but I couldn't sort of undo it because we didn't have Photoshop. I didn't know how to make it look less than it was when it was presented in its entirety. It was like a real conundrum, but I didn't even, if I had not been asked to do that commission of 10, I wouldn't have known that that was what had happened. It was like,
And I guess you'd cleaned off the screen.
yeah.
Lost the
So what I ended up doing was I because I've got the original print. I scanned that back in, turned it into a grayscale, and made a version, made a
Right.
new screen for my original artwork, because I just didn't know how,
Yeah.
I don't know. I find that
That's
interesting.
fun.
Sorry if I'm boring everyone. I just
No,
suddenly
no,
thought.
no, no. And then these
Life
sort
is
of
never what you think, is it? I guess is what I'm trying to
these
say.
glitter box faces, I call them glitter box,
A glitter
like
box.
explosions of and I guess explain it, because you're now building
Yeah.
up hundreds of colours.
So, the next campaign they're out. So that was a surrender campaign. The next campaign was called Come With Us, and their second single was called Star Guitar. And we wanted, with the band, we discussed that it was going to have a humanistic element, but it wouldn't be a more figurative interpretation of a picture, which the surrender campaign was. So the idea was that we wanted a human element, and they were really like that Miles Davies cover. Is it Thoughts of Spain or Blue? And there's a head on it that has a sort of a ray of color around it. And I was like, how about we make a head for them? We make a head from a generic head that's neither male, female, could be any type of person or human, and we encapsulate the music inside it. So that became the sort of, and obviously it was called Star Guitar. So the first image just had stars in it, and that was the one that's slightly smaller, the pinky red image. But behind that, there is like a satellite explosion or something that, again, that we bought from an image library, and it was supposed to be like the sort of, the sort of surreal atmosphere. But it's all those sort of subtleties that are layered up. And then when you look into the small image, you can see that on the top left, the white is heavier, and then the stars sort of disperse. And that, I love this. That is an image of a procession of people in Japan carrying candles at night. And basically, we've just changed the contrast. So we just got the sort of stars, but knowing those human elements are in there. And it just became, I think, because it's sort of iconic as a composition as well, it's become a real sort of motif for the band. And obviously we've just made the book for them, and that I was like, it's an obvious thing to do for the cover. Let's use their world but put them inside it, which we hadn't done before.
Yeah. And the book's stunning. The book's amazing.
It really, I've never worked on a book project before, and I've never had to choose everything in a book that comes down to, you look at the spine and you look at, actually I've got one here, you're looking at what color ribbon goes through it, and what color paper stock you're going to use, and what end papers you're going to have, and there's all these things. Let me just grab it. Can you see that?
Wow.
So when you look in here, like, even like, you pick the little ribbon that goes in there, and then obviously this wasn't my idea, but it's a bloody brilliant one. One of the management, Tony, said, why don't we do the actual ribbon for the book as a spectrum? And I was like, that's genius. That's actually everything we did. So just, this is debossed, the shape behind here, and this is like a sticker that kind of sits on it. And then, like, what color do you want inside, and what color do you want this? And it's just endless. And then the actual case it came in for the deluxe edition was actually silk screened. So they only made 500 of these, but they sent me samples. This is a linen, like, textured paper stock. And they sent me samples, and I printed loads of tests on their paper, and then we sent those to China and they color matched them. And it started off and they were coming back, and I was like, it's not even close. And then in the end, they just totally nailed it. And this sample came back, and I was like, it's unbelievable. I never thought it could be like that. I just thought it might be, a sort of thin version of something that we wanted, and they've totally nailed it. So we're so happy with it. Really,
it's good when someone does something good.
Oh, I mean, they should have done, because Paul that designed it and we did the production on it. And I've never done that before. And it's called production now, but I was just like, that's not working. That's got to look like that. The colors are wrong. We went to the printers. We got another proof. You need to do. The funny thing was, we went to the printers down in Farringdon to do the color matching. And I was like, it's just not, it was transferring it into CYMK. That's how they print it. And I said, you just need to be a bit more red and that. And he said, do you just want to do it? And I was like, you want me to do Photoshop in front of you? I said, right, you all have to turn around and no one can look because it's so basic, my sort of like more red, more blue, less, it was so, but actually it, we got the colors spot on, and it was like, it's amazing how unconfident or incapable you can feel in life, even just because you're so used to just doing things yourself in your own way in a studio or a room where no one else is, that suddenly you go out into the real world and they're like, do you want to use our Photoshop? And I was like, no, I don't really want to do that in front of you, but I have to, because otherwise the colors are colors what I do, and if it's not right.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, another really, and also it was a labor of love. There wasn't, I did that for the love of it, not for the financial side of things. And that's another thing that we need to be aware of in life. It's just
Making good stuff and making sure
making good stuff,
something.
whatever I mean, that's important to me, whether I do a job for free or I get paid well. It's like I put the same, still
Effort
want
in.
it to look, you put the same effort in. Mm.
Yeah, I think people aren't aware of that. There was, because I remember I did a job for somebody and they weren't paying me, and I was designing some flyers or something for a club in London, and then they went, "We're going to pay £50." I was a student. I'm going to pay £50, and I was like, "Good." He goes, "We want more effort, and it better be better." I was like, "But
I'd be
I'd give
like,
you
get your
all the
50
effort
quid.
anyway." And for fifty
I'd be like, I
pounds,
don't want the money.
well,
50
you're
quid.
almost worth saying, don't bother,
Yeah,
because
yeah, I'd just do it. I'm
it,
doing it. So yeah,
the same standard no matter what. And I think that's quite
do.
important. And then I guess these two are quite really graphic. There's some
Yeah.
graphicness of it is good.
Yeah, you've moved. I mean, the large image in the middle out of control, that's from the Surrender campaign. That's the third single from the shot with the guy with his arms in his air. Yeah. We Are the Night. That is the third album I worked on for them. And that was more of sort of a collage. But the interesting thing for that for me is the mountain image. Photoshop had come out then. And I was like, I want to know how to, like, it must be able to work for me. And the filters I just thought were really crude, but I thought if I use them and then I silk screen what comes out of the computer, that might be more interesting. So I had a picture of a mountain and I just collaged it and flipped it so it was sort of symmetrical. And then I put this funny, I don't know, it's like printmaking filter on something. I was like, oh, make it into a drawing. And I was like, oh, that's not very nice. But then when I blew it up, silk screen and put it onto screen and silk screened it, I was like, my God, that's really nice. And that was really quick. And I wouldn't be able to, I don't know, make a woodcut of that looked like that didn't take me 3 weeks to do or something. And I was like, oh, maybe technology can sort of work for me. And it was used in a book cover I did for Penguin Books for H.G. Wells. I mean, I actually used that mountain in about 3 projects. Used it in the camps because each time I juxtapose it with something else, it looked different. And also, you don't have time to keep making new ideas and new drawings. It's silkscreen can be quick, but actually is quite time sensitive if you're working through ideas. If you know what you're doing, it's quite straightforward.
Yeah.
So yeah, technology had sort of come into my realm then.
I guess because it's really like what's fascinating and people might not realize is you've got little light in the Chemical Brothers Surrender one. You've got like that cream color, and then it kind of there's light faces that are sort of
Yeah,
and then the person between the fence down
yeah,
the bottom, and they're the little subtle bits that add that extra.
just literally paper stencils. Go on your light box, cut them out, print them. And again, that was when I'd used the college light box, and some of the information hadn't come out, but it made, then when I printed it, the reason I printed the crowd in negative compared to the two people with their arms up was because back in the day you couldn't, you know, you'd license an image from an image library, but you don't have model release. And these images were probably taken in the 60s. So maybe they're alive, maybe they're not. So you have to present that artwork in a way that, say, for example, Patrick, you went, that person on the right to the lady in the green is me. And I'd be like, it's not. And you have to put it in a way that you can kind of, it could be ambiguous so no one can sue you.
Yeah. On a good question then, have you ever been sued?
No, I haven't. But actually, my say what the job was for, but I worked with a band and they gave a particular reference for something that they wanted reinterpreting. And the design group that I worked with said, we're going to do, I guess, back to pastiche, a version of this, but in your way. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. But what they did was they drew up, it had certain images in it. And they drew these images up and said, basically we stole the composition. Well, they stole the composition and they asked me to do it. So really the job there was I was more of turning their digital image into a silk screen. And actually they were doing their job as in they were really listening to the band, but actually you can't do that. And the estate of the pretty famous artist that happened by sued them. And they did get so it was nothing to do with me. The only thing that happened to me was that we were going to do some more work from it and it got cancelled, obviously, but I got paid, but they had to pay 20 grand to the estate of this, you know. And I felt really bad for them because also the band had decided, not them, but then they took that, you know, they should know the legal rights. And yeah, it was a bit of a mess, but yeah, I try to keep my desk tidy in that way.
It is hard because I was sued once by the rug company. I did an illustration for the New York Times, and it was about husband and wives' different taste in design. And the New York Times supplied me with different brands and products, and it was a Paul Smith rug.
And what? And it was in the illustration.
And it was like, if you imagine a whole illustration, it was on the floor, and the rug company said, "That's our rug," and it was just.
But you're advertising it, aren't you?
Well, it was just an image to talk about taste in design, and they said, "That's our Paul Smith rug. You didn't license it, and you didn't copy register us or whatever." And then I just said, "Give them my wages, the pay." And I don't want nothing, because then they can sue me as much as they want. But I've got nothing to give them. And you gave me the reference.
I always thought that. Yeah.
And that was it was. And then I heard nothing more. I never got paid. The job went through. It all happened, obviously, because it was in the New York Times. And I learned a very valuable lesson. And that was always, when I used to see your work or work like yours, I was always, you know, at college, and you think of Warhol, and you think of photographic imagery, the fear of getting.
Oh no, it's often a big part of when I teach and stuff. It's sort of the main question. But I also, it's like, I guess you have to know who's responsible for what. And, you know, again, that wasn't your fault. You were given the image. But like, surely, I also think that if someone's going to sue you and that's an editorial job and you got paid £400 for it, I'm like, well, take the money. It's not like we're rich people, you know, making money off the back of other people's fortune. And I think there's all those questions. One, obviously you try not to do it and you make authentic imagery, or you make sure you license things properly. But for example, the Chemical Brothers, the main image on the Surrender, I can't the guy's name, but that photographer is a Madeline photographer and he's still alive. And back in the day, before the sort of internet had taken off, you used to, instead of looking at images online from an image library, we went to Holt and Getty, the old school part of Getty Images, as in retro images, and you would say, okay, I'm looking for festivals, music, not politics, gatherings, happiness, or whatever would be your search things. And someone would go, okay, these are all the images, the press shots were in a library of box files, and they'd go, you need box file H6, that's got some in. So you'd get all these box files, and then you'd go through hundreds of black and white press photos and pick things out that you liked. So that was my side of things. The design group, or actually, I don't think it was the design group, it would be the record label because they're much more cutthroat. They were filling the form out as how much to pay for this image. And they said, oh, who's the band? And they'd had 2 albums out by then, and they were well known, but they were still quite niche. And they said, oh, it's the Chemical Brothers, you know, they're a dance act. They, you know, I don't know what it's going to sell. I don't know how it's going to be. And I think they paid them 300 quid to use that image. And it's platinum selling. So, you know, the image library, that's nothing to do with me. I only found that out years later. But when we went to do they had like a box set out that was like the singles edition or something. Or I don't know, something came out a few years ago that was, oh, it's 25 years of surrender. And they said to me, the label, we want to commission you to make a new colorway of that image. And I said, okay, that's fine, but you need to get it cleared with the photographer because he's still alive. And I imagine he's really pissed off that he only got, well, he wouldn't even have got 300 quid. He'd have got a percentage of that, wouldn't he? And he quite right, Richard something. He quite rightly just went, go away, no way. And so I couldn't do it. So I made a new artwork, got paid a little bit, and it was never used. And they were like, God, we can't believe it. And I was like, I can. That's really like, you should just pay him for that, you know, pay him for that job that he never got paid for. And then we can make another. And they didn't do it. So it's nothing to do with the band. The band totally get it. This is a big business that's set up.
Yeah.
But that's how, you know, it's wrong. I said, I'm on the side of
the band could have paid him. The band have made enough money. They could have.
Of course they could, but they're not, they have a massive management team. They're just at home, Tom and Ed, they're just in their studios making music.
Yeah.
They don't do it, you know, it's like,
classic.
It doesn't work like that. They have to separate. Yeah. I know, it's bad, isn't it?
Well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because I brought this one up because I think this is the one you were talking about.
Oh my God, with all the detailing. I know, I couldn't believe it. It was hilarious. I lifted the screen up and I was like, fucking hell, look, there's all those people there that weren't there before.
I don't mind this one neither.
I didn't actually. And do you know what? The funny thing was, nobody really commented on it. To me, they're like, it's like spot the difference times 100. Yeah. No one else said anything. I just thought it's a new version of it. Like, let's just.
Yeah. But I guess because the colorways are a little bit different, they're thinking,
yeah,
you've changed something and they've just ignored it. And most of them aren't looking properly anyway.
And also, you get so many bits like, look at the sort of cans of drink and that old, you know, like 70s style cans that had the different opening and the shape of them. And I love that you can see all that. And I didn't block it all out with like a flat foreground color like I did for the original. I left all that texture in, and I thought, actually, I'm just going to treat it like a new artwork of the same image. Yeah,
I actually like this one. I think
me too, and it has.
I guess on scale, it was massive. It would look great.
Yeah, as a billboard. I remember the band went to LA, and they sent me, when they got back, I was given a photograph, an actual photograph that someone had just taken on their little, you know, 35mm 100 quid camera, and it was of a massive boulevard. What's the really big? It was just the most giant billboard, and I was like, oh, on Sunset Boulevard. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I'll never have seen that, but just to have that little photo of it. I think it's in the book. I think it's in here, actually, in this one. Yeah, but yeah, so it's just.
It is good because it kind of gets you to go up and look at it, and it almost feels like a historical vintage shot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think silkscreen does that for you as well, doesn't it? In that
Yeah.
kind of, it's got a sort of nostalgic. So I'm sort of trying to
Have you
bring things
thought
up
have
to
you thought
date.
about lithography as well?
No, I haven't. I need to. I think that one you're looking at there is a litho, because
Yeah,
that was a
much more
although
detail.
the original screen, but yeah, it was also, it became a poster, but the poster were litho printed as
Yeah,
opposed to, I mean, I'm not very good on the technical side, but it's the more expensive side.
yeah, yeah. You can see because the detail is just, and LIFO will still pick that up. Like if you're printing a book, you're printing with LIFO,
Yeah.
and I guess the chemical
Yes,
it's LIFO as well, which is really
it's
really
different.
tasty.
I'm not being rude and ignoring you. I'm just trying to look for an image at the same time, which I think is in here. But keep.
And the color choices, them yellows are really nice. I guess color
Yeah.
options are really cool.
I mean, it really is. I mean, years ago when I used to hear that people had, there it is, made a book and then they'd spent all night at the printers color proofing it, I'd be like, why do you want to do that? I don't understand that. And then you're on the other side of it and you're like, that yellow is a very specific yellow. I don't want it
Yeah.
to look daffodil yellow. I don't want it to look golden yellow. Can you see the,
Wow.
I know it's like a cover in itself, isn't it? I thought,
Yes.
I'd love to have
Like
been
an
there.
Edward Hopper sort of picture.
Yeah. It's yeah, Sunset Boulevard,
You could
Chemical Brothers
reprint that
promotion.
print, make a
You
screen
could just
print of
keep
it.
going, couldn't you? Actually,
No,
I'm
it
going to use
makes a
my pen.
great
Like,
screen
that is
print.
a good idea. That is a good idea. Thank you, Patrick.
There you go. Right. And then I wanted, because these kind of moved
Oh
into
yeah.
the next space is this sort of abstract. You explain.
Well, I think the connection between my work, no, I don't really think about it, but if I have to stop and look at it, it kind of comes to me is with the Chemical Brothers work, it's always about like a sense of nostalgia or a feeling that isn't quite tangible, and I'm trying to capture that feeling in print. So with the music related artwork, obviously you've got music to take you on that journey. So that moment of surrendering, we knew when we were looking through images at the image library that that image of that guy who was called Jesus Gellert, and he was like sort of a bit of a nomad that would go around to festivals, and you had this outfit made, and I don't think he even really sort of, he just was in the moment on his own. And there's many pictures in history of, you'll see festival black and white press pictures and he'll be somewhere in there just doing his thing. So that was the moment of sort of surrendering to something, or feeling like when you look back on something, a holiday you've been on or a gig that you went to, you get that lovely feeling. So that was what I wanted to try and push with these more recent works. And the one in the middle, I thought I'd call it Hacienda, just because I like to riff things off musical places or bands or theory or but this is, for me, is all about my love for printmaking. And these, the middle print and the print to the right, are like the size of a door, 1 meter 40 by 1 meter 10, and they are just layers and layers and layers of ink of different images that I just sort of make up on the spot. But the nice thing is with them is that I can make it, this print studio that I use, because I don't have a print table big enough to make those, called Jealous. They're a gallery and they have print studios upstairs. They have really big presses, so they allowed me to make something up and make an edition of it at the same time. So I don't really know what I'm going to make before I go in. Obviously, I have an idea because I put images onto screens, but I'm often not sure of it'll change as it goes on. So I make little maquettes in my studio, like the one on the left there.
Yep.
And then I take images from that and blow them up really big, and then make new works on the spec. And as I'm making them, I'm thinking about, so the one on the right is called Island Life because it has a sort of subliminal landscape or sunset in there type thing. But nothing is, I'm never trying to depict anything apart from a feeling or a memory or a kind of. And then I did textiles at college, so I love pattern and I find it color very emotive. So I feel like I'm trying to like place someone somewhere, and the enjoyment from these images is a kind of what you absorb from those colors and what it makes you think of. And yeah,
they feel quite kinetic.
yeah, they do, don't
Pulsing.
they? Or sort of like maybe, especially on that sort of lovely black paper, sometimes they feel sort of like they have a sort of tribal quality in, and I mean that in a really open sense, like your tribe could be your mates that you go clubbing with or something. It doesn't have to be like in its truest sense. But there's a kind of totemic kind of, and also I guess things that are concentric I got into from the Chemical Brothers, where they love references that they would give me would be always to do with light or concentric circles. And then we took that into concentric heads. And actually, there's just something about entering an artwork and leaving it again, that kind of radial thing that I feel
Yeah,
really
pulsing.
absorbed, pulsing, that I feel
I think
really
that's
absorbed by.
musicians.
Music, yeah, yeah.
It's the idea of the music is really coming through. There'd be, I guess it'd be really interesting to see if these were animated. Imagine these as like at the
Oh my
Chemical
God.
Brothers, sort of pulsating.
Well, oh my God, you just filling my head with ideas. Actually, yeah. I mean, I would love to. They have worked with two guys called Smith and Lyle, Adam Smith, and I've forgotten the other guy's name, and they do the visuals for the Chems gigs, and they're fucking amazing. They are so good. They are They work with the choreographer who sets the dances to the music. Then they have costumes made. Then all this is filmed, so you've got this filmic quality to their gigs, and it's unbelievable. But to think, I've always thought, God, give me a chance. Like I
Yeah,
could do something with that, you know? Like,
yeah,
what about what? I'm not saying that I want, just because I would love to work in a fresh way, not because I think my work should be everywhere. I'm like,
yeah,
I want to do, you know. So I'm working with an animator. I've just literally just started last week, and we're trying to sort of. He's teaching me how to how to present my work to give to him that he can animate, and what that animations could be about. And so we're just sort of we're trying to make little samples now, so he's teaching me how it could look, and then we'll come up with a project together. So
yeah, yeah. I guess it's sort of partnerships now where you
yeah,
don't
and
want to
also
reskill, but you've got the possibilities of treading into new arenas. And I think,
absolutely. You know, you look back on someone like Robert Rauschenberg and all the stuff he did for Merce Cunningham, and the dance, you know, just like
yeah,
backdrops to dancing, just big paintings behind them or costumes. And you just think, God, I want to, yeah, it's not that you feel that you have to change, but when you collaborate, you've got two people's thoughts coming together, and you see your work in a way, you know, most of the time, I don't have my own artwork up at that house because I don't want to look at it. I've looked at it all day. I have other people's, but when you're suddenly making something with someone else, I just think, I just sometimes enjoy it more because it's almost like half the responsibility, half the pressure. You
yeah,
can like ease, and someone does something with your work, or you talks about your work in a way, and you think, God, does that have, I've never thought of it like that, how lovely, and that inspires you, and it's just an ongoing kind of
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. And I think that's the nice part, is where there's an interplay between you and
Yeah,
someone else, and
yeah,
if you almost can let them freestyle off of what you're doing, sometimes they come
mm,
back and surprise you. And I think that's where you kind of move into a nice space of like, I'll bounce off you, you bounce off me, almost this
yeah,
Basquiat Warhol experience.
absolutely. It's all these brilliant
It is nice
collaborations
to
because
do.
there's not enough time to learn everything, isn't it?
No,
Like
no.
someone said to me, um you know, do you want to go and do some pottery workshops? And I'm like, I can't dip into things like that. I've either got to know everything about it, or I can't do it. It's like, feels like homework for me from school. It's like I just can't. So it's really nice to finally be able to collaborate when, and give into that and say, actually, I don't know about that side of things, and how exciting, how good to be learning still at this age. And you know,
I think with ceramics now, because I think they can transfer screen prints direct on
You
ceramic
could exactly. You can silk screen onto this
material
special
and then
paper,
transfer.
yeah, and you can press it on and then fire it, and it's like
Yeah, you don't need
I,
to do that.
you don't need to do that. But also, that wouldn't be my interest in ceramics.
Yeah,
That's the thing. My interest would be like those sort of like making brushes from twigs and getting the lovely big
yeah,
gestural Japanese, but people have studied this for years.
yeah,
I know what I want to do, and I just think actually let the ceramicists do the
yes,
ceramicists, and I'll just carry on with the printmaking. And
yeah. I
yeah.
think that's our last slide.
Oh,
So I think it is. Yes. I'm just
thank you,
going to,
Patrick, and everyone. I really enjoyed that.
but yes, thank you for that, Kate. And I'm aware of your time and everyone else's time, but excellent. And it was nice to catch up and hear what you've got to say and meet you.
Thank you.
You know,
And nice to meet
sort
you
of had
too.
this minor dialogue on Instagram
Yeah, we
and
should get a coffee and talk print at some point.
definitely there will be more, don't you? We're running an event in February, so I will
Yeah.
be coming back to you
Oh, great.
in London. So I'm trying to get some printmakers. We're doing something, show studio is showing, so it'd be nice to have a little
I'd love to
discussion
be
and
part
maybe
of it.
show
It's
some
really
of
nice
the.
yeah. I never sit and talk about my work, so it's all in my head. So it's really nice. Thank you for that
No, good,
opportunity.
excellent. Thank you, Kate, and
All
have a nice
right.
day.
Have a good day,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so
Bye bye.
much. Take
Bye bye.
care. Bye.